What was the biggest bullet you dodged? Many years ago, my flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane, taking off I think, went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Hubs, my sister, and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to wash my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the house. We were literally walking out the front door and I said, hey, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff. And everyone agreed. So we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave, a hot pocket I think. And all of a sudden I hear the loudest bang I think I've ever heard. From the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other wide-eyed and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic. Smoking something fierce. Plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second I was just stunned. Then, screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway at the car we had been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago. Totaled. Completely totaled. Brand new 2011 G6. Destroyed. Guy hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard, it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was ducked. Crown Vic was ducked. Tree was ducked. D. We immediately assumed it was drunk driving. G. Being the 4th and all. L. I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man. N. Very bewildered. D. Unable to comprehend what I was saying but conscious. S. I will never forget the look he gave me, confused. D. Helpless. S. Scared. D. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances. S. And tried my best to follow their instructions. S. My sister was only 14 at the time. E. So I handled the call. Turns out dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low blood sugar. R. Hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out. T. And was plowing down our residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk past another house, then slammed into my husband's car, and subsequently, the tree. If we had been anywhere near that yard/driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured or dead. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged, or should I say, huge car dodged. Not me, but I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open, while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. I stayed up all night before a day trip to Hong Kong. You know that days when you haven't slept. You're just kinda robotic and doing the human stuff. Nearly zero awareness of anything. Well, I went across the street and my friend behind me snatched my shoulder and yanked me backwards just in time to feel the whoosh of a double-decker bus breezing past us. I just looked at him like, oh, thanks man, and it took a whole extra minute for my brain to process I would be duck and dead had he not grabbed me. Was going to move to a different apartment complex last month. Got injured at work and lost hours. Therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week some Ashad was cooking meth and caught the building on fire. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. My newborn needed to be rushed to a super high level NICU to be put into a state of induced hypothermia because he only had hours before he would suffer permanent brain damage. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The small town next door just barely upgraded their hospital to have that hypothermia suite, one of only a few in Texas. He's doing great. No sign of any damage. After I had a stroke, I was in a coma and it didn't look like I'd wake up. The doctors asked my wife if they should let me go. I only exist because she said no. I didn't dodge a bullet so much as my wife blocked it for me. Didn't lend money to a friend because I was broke. Few months later he disappeared with several thousands he had stolen from my other friends. When my great aunt passed away I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement and suddenly my dad is like, "Whoa, put that down gently and let's move away from here." So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during WWII. Bomb squad came and took it away. Freshman year of college I had a calc class. It was material I had learned before, but for various reasons they didn't give me transfer credit. So I skipped class quite frequently, though I usually slept in. One morning I find myself awake at 8:30 and not really feeling like sleep. Might as well check in on the class and see what's going on. It was the midterm exam. I can answer this in a literal way. When I was a child, I was playing video games with my little brother. Well, he found our dad's gun and fired it. No one was hurt, but it scared the shit out of me. I interviewed for a job that I wanted desperately in August 2019. After the initial phone interview, I went in for an in-person interview at 4 PM on a Wednesday. I had a rejection in my inbox by 8 PM and was completely gutted. Then 2020 happened, and they laid off 60% of their staff and will probably go under. I'm thankful for that rejection every day. Getting chased by someone with a knife across my apartment. I closed my door at the right moment, so that person ended up stabbing my wooden door instead. The mark was there until I left the apartment a few years later as a constant reminder of what could have been. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the backseat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hit a power line pole down the street causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or two above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. I survived a rocket attack that landed about 10 meters from me, very close to where we were standing. We were so close to the launch site that the warning alarm came after the rocket had already impacted. Thankfully, we were able to dive under a vehicle for some shelter and the three of us made it through unscathed. Had a teacher in high school who was wicked sarcastic and witty, while also being a hard-ass grader. To me, the perfect teacher. Class was challenging, but we were all laughing and having a good time. He was a great mentor and I continued to visit his class even after I graduated. One time, post-graduation, I was sitting in his office and I had just given him some art to decorate his classroom with, and he was so excited he blurted, "I could kiss you." Something about the intense eye contact unsettled me, but I laughed it off. 17y/a girl. What can I say? Couple months later, he was arrested for having a sexual relationship with an underage student. My dad was going through severe depression 10 years ago, and my life was equally shitty for a whole multitude of reasons. And it was rubbing off on me. I spent what felt like half an hour crying on the floor and working up the nerve to pull the trigger. Then when I finally did, the safety was on. I sold my gun the next morning. Wish my dad was able to say the same 3 years later. R.I.P. Close bracket. Edit. Thank you all for the kind words and even awards. I never expected this thread to explode in popularity the way it did. I've tried my best to respond to everybody, but if I missed you, That doesn't mean that I'm not thankful for your input. A literal police car. The police were chasing someone, and I was crossing the road and my dumbass was walking slowly, and the police car nearly grazed me. Look both ways, and take off your headphones when you cross the road, kids! Exclamation mark. 7. 92 more's a rifle bullet. When I was 15ish I was very depressed, and got very drunk. Found my great grandfather's WWI captured German rifle. Found some bullets from that time. Loaded it. And put the rifle in my mouth. And pulled the trigger. Thankfully the bullet was not loaded properly / was a dud for being 90 years old at the time. And did not fire. This chick wanting to hook up with me so quickly. I kept putting it off. Finally after a month she had to admit she was pregnant with someone else's kid. Tried to trap me. So about 20 something years ago, I was on my way to an interview through a suburb of Washington DC. That particular road has you driving at a not so slow speed, with no shoulders and sidewalks with many pedestrians. A woman standing on the sidewalk stepped backwards into the roadway, just as I was approaching. Slammed on the brakes, honked, and she turned slightly. I stop and get out, and she's rolling around clutching her foot, wailing about her foot getting rolled over. My heart is hammering. I have no idea how much trouble I'm in. And my brain is ticking away the time to the interview. Pedestrians kept coming up to her to tell her that they saw me run over her foot. Duh. Of course you did. After a few minutes of this, the woman stood up, said Merry Christmas, it was definitely nowhere near Christmas, and walked away through the people standing there. I took my dodged bullet with much appreciation, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't get the job FWIW, but a couple of inches and my life could have changed for the worse in so many ways. 4 Christmases ago I was in Mexico with mom, dad and brother doing some last minute shopping at the local Walmart. We finished our shopping and went to the car. As soon as we were leaving 2 trucks stopped right in front of the main Walmart entrance. They were a cartel and were hunting for the son of one of the opposing cartel's main dudes. They fired a fucking bazooka. I think they got the guy. And then bullets started flying everywhere. My dad was driving. He hit the gas. We almost crashed, cause there was panic everywhere and we had a red light. The military showed up while we were driving away and a chase ensued. Luckily we were close to the house where we were staying and made it back quite fast. We heard gunshots for the next 3 hours. Dodged some bullets and even a missile that day. Around 0 pounds. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rear view mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane. And less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything. But 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. My great grandfather was in the merchant navy in the war. He was in the engine room at the bottom of the ship and his friend came down to take over the shift early. Minutes later a torpedo struck and everyone at the bottom of the ship couldn't escape and died. My great grandfather would have been one of them otherwise. Then, he was in the sea for a while and happened to be picked up by some Portuguese fishermen who saved him. Then, all part of the same tale, he escaped death again. He was meant to be on a flight back to the UK, but got kicked off last minute to be replaced by VIPs. That plane got shot down and everyone died in it. Miss you great grandpa X. Nearly died in a car accident about a month ago. I was extremely shaken up at first and in shock for a few days, but after talking to the psychiatrist there about it, I realized that if the guy driving hadn't crashed the car, I would have been raped by him. I told him I wanted to go home, but he said, my apartment first before driving off, and then we crashed. Probably the biggest bullet I've ever dodged, even if it resulted in internal bleeding. My dad grew up in Safford, a rural town in southeast Arizona. Back in the 1930s kids there got their first .22 caliber rifle at age 5 or 6. He and a friend found an old WWI helmet and my dad suggested he put on the helmet and ricochet a bullet off it to see what it would be like. His friend took aim, but before pulling the trigger said, "Benny, put the helmet on the fence post there to test it first." The bullet went straight through both sides of the helmet. If my dad hadn't dodged that bullet, I could not tell that story. Went to kill myself by putting a plastic bag over my head and tying it off. Figured it would be less messy to be found. My cat started going crazy on the other side of the door when I started to get lightheaded and feel sort of nauseous. I thought, oh right, you need deodorant and no one else will feed you, and I untied the bag to feed the cat. After the fact I realized my cat literally saved me from one of my lowest points. God, I miss that cat. Still can't believe I came that close. Edit. Hi friends. Thank you for all the warm thoughts and sharing stories of your savior pets. Do save your awards please. This is the most I've ever gotten. Give them to another comment that has yet to receive an award. Spread the smiles, love and support. Thank you so much. I'm truly touched by the human connection in this thread. My ex-husband. He told me he wanted a divorce, but I didn't. He agreed to work on our relationship and give it a few months. We set a date and went to work, and he acted like things were changing and he wasn't going to leave. He started encouraging me to take out debt and spend money out of our savings, etc. Turns out that he was lying to me and had every intention of leaving on the date we set and crushing me emotionally, so I'd hate him forever, and was encouraging me to take out debt since it was all in my name and he'd get half the savings. I only found out his little scheme because he gave me his Apple Watch that we'd just purchased while he was working on something, and I read his messages because I had a feeling something wasn't quite right. For those of you that don't know, if you delete a message on your phone, it doesn't automatically delete from your Apple Watch. I found a few hundred messages to his best friend and mom talking about how much better he could do than me. He had feelings for a coworker and knew she wanted him to. Spoiler alert, she didn't. She's just a nice lady. He hated me and I was the worst decision he'd ever made. He never really had feelings for me anyway, etc. It was a bunch of savage, cruel shit. Finding it rocked me to my core. I'd never imagined anyone could hate me like that, let alone someone I was married to. This happened like 2 weeks after he'd initially sat me down to talk. We were in public and I cried after finding the messages. I went up to him, held up his watch, and quietly told him I knew his plans and to find a different ride home. His smile dropped and the color drained from his face so quick. I went straight home, and by the time he arrived, Ed packed him a bag of essentials, left it on the doorstep, and called both his mom and best friend to let them know he'd be needing a place to stay. He was crying, and we hashed it out on the steps, which wasn't my proudest moment. I won't lie though, to see him cry after what he had said about me was so satisfying. The next day, I had the locks changed. By the end of the day after that, I had all of his shit packed and waiting neatly in the living room for him to pick up. By the end of that month, I had filed for divorce and we were officially and legally done forever. He's a ducking loser and I absolutely dodged a bullet. It's been a long road to rebuild my trust in people, though. I'm definitely better off having gone through the whole situation. And while looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened. It absolutely sucked to go through. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.